Ace Atkins is one of our favorites. We discuss him on this program on and off for various reasons. He writes books, you see. He lives around this area. He began with the Nick Travers books many years ago. I have some at home. Then he went on to the next level, which was the Spencer novels. But Mr. Robert B. Parker passed on after 35. This is Ace's fifth book in the Spencer collection. Coming next is the new Quinn Colson book. Those books are set around these parts. And he's also now has jumped into the graphic novel business, which we'll get to all of these things. Great to see you. Welcome home.
Thank you, sir.
After a tour of America, where have you been?
Oh my God, I've been everywhere. I've been started off in New York. I was out in Phoenix, all through Texas, and so this is just the first leg. Out for a couple weeks.
The book was out. It's been out for 2 weeks now.
2 weeks. So they send me out until they feel the sales are good, and then I get to come home and I rest a little bit, and then in July the new Quinn will be out. So the southern stuff. So I have to switch accents. I talk Boston, and then I take some time out, and then I come back in a few weeks, and then the second week in July I'll be out.
How are you received from town to town? In Boston, it's a no-brainer because the Spencer books have been set there forever. And part two of that question is, how much time have you spent and do you spend there? Because this book is so nuanced as it relates to Boston.
Sure.
I guess it has to be to do the job right.
Well, I mean, first, the first answer to your question of how am I received across the country? I mean, it's just
Badly?
No, it's amazing. It's just people that meet me in the airport, they just they throw flowers at my feet
And confetti.
And
Rice.
women with T-shirts with my name on it. It's unbelievable. It's just
So this is
I'm
all
thankful
taken
for
off
it.
finally.
It's just I think it's just the literary community.
All five of them.
I didn't tell you how old these people were. I just said that they were excited.
Yeah.
Boston's great. That's been one of the really great things about this job is getting to know that city and having to know that city.
Yeah,
And spend I've got to spend a lot of time in Boston. I can't fake it. I can't phone it in. I've got to go up there. I've got to go to Fenway. I've got to hang out in Cambridge. I've got to listen to people talk. I mean, it's all part of it. It's part of my job.
And you've done that now for how many years? It's hard to think that Mr. Parker's been gone for 5 years.
Yeah.
And so you've spent a good part of every year, I'm guessing, before the book, or do you write up there?
No, I mean it's pretty much just research, and I come back here and I write it. But coming up on 6 years, Bob's been gone for 6 years.
Unbelievable.
And,
hard to believe. Well,
yeah,
now
really.
this book, as somebody who counts among his really good friends, some firefighters that I know very well, and I have watched them work, and been to the fire station and kind of watched them. There is a difference in a smaller town firefighter than ones that operate out of Boston. Now, it is uncanny to me because in the past, in the Quinn books and in these books, you on occasion will take a news story that you have seen, and that is the genesis of an idea for a book. Now, is this one slow burn on newsstands and on the internet now part of any kind of story that you saw or heard about?
It is. I was searching for a story. I knew I wanted to write something about the Boston Fire Department because when you are in Boston, it's a huge part of the community. It's part of the fabric of the town. I mean, you think about people, the quintessential Boston experience, Boston firefighters. A lot of them have uncles and grandfathers, and it's a very Irish tradition. I mean, it's just everything you expect. And they were wonderful to me, and they were really. Let me into that community. I got to meet arson investigators. I got to hang out with the commissioner. I got to go to fire scenes. I got to slide down the pole. That was
Wow.
great. Yeah. And it wasn't even at the firehouse. It was just at this club called. It was at the place called the Golden Banana. But they let me slide on the pole.
With some of your
great.
fans from the airport.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was wonderful.
Yeah.
But I needed a story, but the genesis was to do a story about the Boston Fire Department and write about that community and write about those people. And there was indeed a case. I heard you talking earlier this morning
We
about
had
people.
3 stories this past month about this.
Yeah, and this happened in Boston in the mid '80s. I'm not telling you anything from the book that you don't find out from the first 5 pages, but there were a group of guys that got together and they thought the way to really get help for the Boston Fire Department to get them, some type of press was to set fires, and that would help them get their funding. That would help them, get a good start. Not a good idea.
Plus, there were firefighter groupies, if you will.
Yeah.
They couldn't qualify themselves but they liked to watch things burn and to be supportive in their own little twisted brains. And so they burned a church. A bad start.
Yeah.
And then you kill firefighters. That's a bad start, part two.
And this, again, came from the actual case. At the time that the thing was prosecuted in the mid-'80s, it was the largest arson ring in American history. And we were
Serial fires.
Serial fires, and they went under the name of, again, it wasn't one person, it was a group of guys. They all bonded together because they thought they were, exposing the problems of the fire department being underfunded. In reality, they would have done anything. They would have cut off their leg to be a Boston fireman.
Right.
It's a hard job to get. And they're whack jobs. They're just a bunch of nuts. And then they started just loving the notoriety of it. They loved being Mr. Firebug. They loved setting the fires. They liked outwitting the arson investigators. And it just grew and grew and grew until finally they were able to nail them.
Our guest is Ace Atkins. The new book of the Spencer novel is out. It's called Slow Burn. I asked some pals of mine who do this for a living. Is Sparks your own creation, or is that an actual name of this bunch of knuckleheads that flock to fires?
Well, the Sparks are good guys. The Sparks they're a legitimate.
They were the supporters.
They're
yeah.
the supporters. They're a legitimate, very famous organization in Boston.
So they are real.
They are real, but they are not the guys. The arsonists were not Sparks. In fact, the Sparks ostracized these guys. They did not want them part of their group. They did not want to be around them. And in fact, it was some of the Sparks that recognized that these guys could possibly be the arsonists. But yeah,
it's hard to tell sometimes how they're commingling and who's who and who's not.
Sure.
That's part of the beauty of the story.
Yeah, yeah. So you don't know who to trust, and you don't know who's legitimate and who's not. But yeah, no. There are people, and I imagine in Memphis you have firefighter supporters that are out there, and they're great people.
They bring bottles of water.
And
they're there to help you and support
sure.
you and help you out and stuff.
Yep.
And I guess in this part of the country that it's a whole different thing when you're part of a volunteer fire department, and you wonder if those guys ever get out there and get randy and start fires just to have something to do.
Well, there was a case. I've got a buddy of mine who's an investigator for the ATF, and they were investigating some fires, and it was some guys in a rural fire department in Mississippi. I don't remember which county it was in, and they were bored, and so they just started setting fires to buildings so they would have something to do.
Empty warehouses. It just gives you a reason to keep on going.
Sure. Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
Now, this Spencer book is yours. This is your fifth one, and this is my ongoing list. As we discussed before, the fact that you were encouraged, let's say that is the kind word, by editors to perhaps update your references as far as it goes with pop culture.
Sure.
And you did not want to do that because this is Spencer, and Spencer doesn't know who the Kardashians are, nor does he care.
Yeah.
And
he's a better man for it.
He's a better man for it, and he's still Spencer.
Yeah.
In one sentence or two, referencing Y.A. Tittle,
Yes.
John Coltrane, and Carmen Miranda. Oh, Jesus, man.
There's not enough Carmen Miranda in our world.
We need more of her.
We
and
do.
Y.A. Tittle, I'm old enough to remember his bald head and,
Yeah.
him bleeding on the field in the Giants' end zone.
My father was a teammate of his.
Is that right?
Yeah, played for the 49ers when he was out there back in the late 50s. So.
Unbelievable.
So this stuff comes organically, So.
Jackson Pollock, Mr. Peanut. I guess the most current reference is Bonnie Tyler. That's probably the newest one.
Yeah, and that was a real thing.
That was 25 years ago.
Yeah,
That was a real song.
sure.
So have you had to fight to retain your right to stay in the 70s and 60s and 50s and whatever the heck?
Well, I think Spencer's a man of a certain age where, I mean,
I'm trying to, he's got to be 70.
The Spencer I'm writing about is in his mid to late 50s, and he's a guy who's still in
Time
good shape
stands
at
still.
times. Well, there's a readjustment, and Bob had to do that himself.
Yeah.
He did, and I think in a lot of ways my Spencer is different because I've allowed him to age, and so he is having some physical problems. I mean, he's beaten up a lot of guys.
Yes.
He's got a bad knee. He's got some joint problems, that kind of stuff. So he's an aging tough guy, and that's going back to kind of like the reference of, I love to write westerns, and my Quinn books, my Mississippi books are essentially westerns, and I think that's really where Bob came from too, writing about Spencer as kind of a western gunfighter hero, and at this point in his career, he is the aging gunfighter, and guys are younger and tougher and stronger, and he's got to outwit them.
Yeah, one of Bob's best books to me was Gunman's Rhapsody.
Oh, sure, the Wyatt Earp move,
which kind of recounts the entire doings there in Tombstone.
He was fascinated by those characters.
Now, and you know what? You read that book and then you watch Tombstone. They're quite similar in content and in every detail.
Yeah.
Follows history as it went down.
Well, there's a funny story about that. For years, Parker went out. I got to know who I know you spoke to on numerous occasions. Well, Joan Parker.
Oh yes,
numerous. Joan was a lovely.
I've saved emails from her. I have 5 at my desk.
Yeah, and I'm sure you probably had to sit there with the dump button just in case the F-bomb came out when she was talking.
Joan could roll. Yeah.
But Bob and Joan went out to L.A. in the late '80s and tried to sell movies. And he's at this point, a very famous writer. Multiple bestseller, and one of the projects he was very passionate about was doing a film that was the Wyatt Earp story. And this is before Tombstone. This is before the Lawrence Kasdan movie of Wyatt Earp that he was trying to sell it. And he said that in an interview, he said he knew he had it with Hollywood when he went to a pitch meeting, and there were executives out there, and he gave the whole story, and he talked about what was going to happen in the gunfight of the OK Corral and Doc Holliday and all that stuff. And they get through at the end of the pitch meeting, and there was a executive there that she was in her 20s, and she just said, "Can I ask you a question?" She goes, "Now who is Wyatt Earp again?" And he said, "That was it." He said that was it.
I think the first time that we talked to him, that we asked him about his experiences, because Spencer was on TV in various forms.
Sure.
And Hawk was on his own show, wasn't it?
A man called Hawk. Not a good show.
No. But I recall that Bob had a distasteful attitude about Hollywood and how but he was okay with the Spencer TV show that was a big hit with Mr. Urick.
It really made his career.
But he got soured by the entire thing, I think, because of crap like what you just said.
Well,
who's Wyatt Earp? Really?
I do think, looking from a different perspective now, I think there were things about the TV show, for people who remember the TV show as it's been on 30 years ago, that he didn't like about it, that differed from the books. There were things that he did. However, if somebody does a show like that today, it's going to differ a lot from the books. So the differences that were on the show, on the ABC show in the mid-'80s, were minor compared to probably what could happen to a modern Spencer story. But I watched it recently. It's just come on DVD, and
I haven't seen it in
Urick
years.
is great, and he's funny. He's a big guy. He was a football player at Florida State. He's terrific, and Avery Brooks is great. Parker was not really fond of Urick. I think they had a personality issue. The one thing that he really did like, he did like the Jesse Stone movies. He thought that Selleck was terrific.
Cast perfectly.
And he loved the film Appaloosa. In fact, the first time he saw it,
Joan told us about she and Bob having dinner with Ed Harris.
Yeah.
And they were concerned that Ed would be bothered by, fans like you have.
Right.
And they were at a restaurant, and the fans came up and they ignored Ed Harris and Robert Parker. How you doing? They didn't even know who Ed Harris was.
Yeah.
But that movie with Ed Harris and Viggo Mortensen was absolutely perfectly cast and beautifully done.
I agree.
I
just wish they would. I wish they would have.
Right.
Yeah, I wish they would have done another one. They put a lot of care in that movie because it's just they just don't make westerns anymore. It's just the popular theory in Hollywood that just westerns don't sell. But Ed Harris, going into it, he knew that it probably was going to be a big blockbuster, but they put a lot of care in there with the weaponry, with the details, with the period clothes, all that. And he's
the clothing,
and you don't get better actors than that.
No, that was a great piece of work. Our guest is Ace Atkins. The new Spencer book is called Slow Burn. It has been out for a couple of weeks and carries on the tradition that Mr. Parker began in 1973 with a Godwolf manuscript, and it goes on and on and on. How long can we keep Spencer alive? Do these books sell to a certain demographic? Are you trying to attract, or do you care to draw a new audience to this, or has that ever crossed your mind?
It does. I mean, I really want to get a younger audience, and I want a new generation, and not only find the new books and find what's going on with Spencer right now, but to go back and read the God Wolf manuscript.
Yep.
I want them to find those early books that Bob did in the 70s. And I mean, it is a different version of Spencer in the way that the TV show was. There were tweaks to that character that had to make him appealing to that audience of that time period of the 80s. Spencer was a Vietnam veteran in the TV show. In the books, he's not a Vietnam veteran.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
He was a Korean War veteran, and things change. I mean, he is somebody, that was the only thing that the estate had asked me to do, and he's such an iconic character. He's such a terrific character. They just said, we want to keep him modern, and we want him in the modern times. And we want
But you defied that, didn't you?
Well, no, I mean, the
Y.A.
books...
Tittle?
Well, I mean, my frame of reference, I'm 45 years old, so my frame of reference is not, I'm not watching the Kardashians either, and I'm not watching, I still buy vinyl, so I'm kind of, a throwback in many ways as well. And, I have health problems. I've got my shoulder hurts and my knees hurt
from
football back in the day,
yes.
and that kind of stuff. But, I think my thing is to keep the character contemporary and also to draw a younger audience. I think he is not a character that is for just for your grandfather or for
he's not dated.
He's not dated.
Stretch,
They're funny. I want them to kind of go back to what Bob did years ago, which is very gritty, edgy, and that's part of my job.
Well, he still maintains the same cynical, sarcastic approach to this. Susan and he are still the same. Pearl is getting older, but how many Pearls have we been through now?
Well, in real life, in the books, there have been two Pearls. Pearl is the German short-haired pointer who's kind of like the Asta. Here's another contemporary reference for you with Asta. I know some of your listeners remember Asta in those movies from the 30s. But there have been two Pearls.
That's going way back.
That is going way back. That was the early days of radio.
I began then, I think. Yeah.
You had William Powell on the show a few times. I said martinis. You could smoke in the room. That was when the show started over at the Peabody, right?
Yes.
The rooftop of the Rainbow Room.
We had the basement back in that day.
Excellent.
So, where were we? We got totally off track there.
How many Pearls? Two Pearls in
Pearls.
books. In real life, there were 3 or 4 Pearls at least. So.
Hawk's presence is, I won't say diminished, but... Hawk he's present enough to make his presence known. And Zebulon Sixkill, do we have plans for him going forward?
I think he's a character.
That was Bob's last book.
Yeah, I mean, but again, Spencer, iconic American hero, Private Eye in Boston. Hawk is his sidekick, the toughest African American badass. He's like, he makes Shaft seem like a sissy. I mean, Hawk is cool personified,
Hawk is, yes.
And so just everyone loves every time he walks on
Right.
onto the screen or the page. And Sixkill was a character that Parker was writing or had written when he died.
Right.
That was in his last book,
Right.
book 39. It was a book called Sixkill.
39, okay.
And again, kind of the Western tradition. It was like the old gunfighter training the
Right.
kid. And so I was stuck with this kid. And what do I do with this young guy? So, I hate to break it to you, but there's not a lot of Cree Indians in Boston.
Yeah.
You don't see a lot of Cree Indians. I don't know why he had brought this Cree Indian to Boston, but I was stuck with him. I had to deal with him. So for the books that I did, the last 5 books, is a kind of a mentoring, a Big Brothers program of tough guys, and where he ends up is kind of completed in the new book, Slow Burn.
Well, it is out there, and it is as always a great piece of work. Now, let's go back to your beginnings. Graphic novels have never really been my thing. Wes is more into that. My son loves them. One of the first characters that you wrote was set in New Orleans. He was a football player, a journalist. He was Nick Travers. And now you hooked up with this fellow named Marco Finnegan. Last Fair Deal Gone Down, a Nick Travers graphic novel. Explain the background and how and why this occurred.
Well, really early on in my career, I was very young when I first got published. I was working as a newspaper reporter in Florida. I was not that far in Tampa. I was not that far out of Auburn University, and I was writing novels. And I idolized guys like Robert Parker and I don't know if you remember John D. McDonald, who wrote Travis Media books, one of my favorites.
Yes.
Elmore Leonard, Hammett, Chandler, all that. So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a crime writer.
Noir.
I didn't want to write big thrillers. I didn't want to write about the rogue FBI agent and all that. That's just
There's plenty of that going on.
I just don't. That's just not what I do. I like writing character-driven crime books, and I like really good characters like Travis McGee and Spencer, and that's what I want to do. So I came up with this character who was kind of, for lack of a better term, he's kind of my Spencer. He was a Southern Spencer.
Yeah.
I wanted to do something with a Southern hero, and so I was like, I created that character. I was like 19, 20 years old, and so what does he do? His main skill set is like hanging out in bars in New Orleans, meeting women, and drinking beer. So this is all coming from like the psyche of a 19, 20-year-old kid of like what the best thing would be, and he's got a real cool pad, a great apartment, and occasionally gets to help people out. And so this story was written 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It was really the first. It was.
I have 2 of these on my bookshelves, and I can't recall when I even how long I've had them.
Yeah. Oh, they're the long
way
time
old.
ago. And so I was published when I was 26 years old, and then this long story, it wasn't published initially, and then once the other novels came out, it was too short to be a novel and too long to be a short story. And so eventually it saw the light of day, and it was nominated for some awards and all kinds of great stuff. And so it just has stuck around. And so this wonderful artist who lives in Southern California, his real name is Marco Margolanis, who's just talented as hell, sent me some sketches, and we actually, this is just the good upside of social media, met him through Twitter. And he sent me some sketches of my characters, sent me some sketches of Spencer, and we started talking, and he said, would you ever be interested in doing a graphic novel? And I said, sure, and I'll be damned if the guy didn't draw it and made
So
it happen.
you said native Spencer, but went back to
Well,
the
I
early
didn't.
stuff.
I don't really have any control over Spencer. That's
Oh, you don't?
that's outside. I am Spencer for hire. Once a year I'm hired to be Spencer, and so
Right.
I am very gladly, and I love being.
So
Spencer.
Nick Travers is yours, though.
But Nick Travers is my creation and my ownership, and I said, if you want to do something with Nick Travers, do it. And it's a really a lovely recreation of the short story that I wrote as a kid, and he does a beautiful job with these black and white drawings of New Orleans, and brings these streets to life. I mean, he's an extremely talented guy, and in a strange kind of twist, the publisher that he found to put this book out, the guy was an Auburn grad and had actually been at Auburn the same time I was there. So it took a guy from L.A. to put 2 guys from Alabama together to make this thing happen.
It's
But
a small world.
It is a small world. But I'm very proud of it. I think it's beautiful. It just came out last week.
Did you do the scripting for it, or did he take care
No,
of that?
I can't take any credit for it. I wrote the story about 20 years ago, and this guy, he did the drawing. He did the whole.
So he just
broke down-
borrowed from the story and took the highlights and made it into this.
and he made it better. He took out the crap.
Well,
Took
so
out the stuff that I put in 20 years ago. There was crap.
So you have a new editor, and there's a new one coming soon as well.
He's working on my first novel. My first novel is a book called Crossroad Blues.
Right.
It's a very Memphis book, actually. The beginning of it takes place in Memphis. Part of it takes place in the Mississippi Delta. The opening scene is a guy hanging out at this rundown motel on EP Boulevard, and so he's doing the script right now, and I read it last night. It's terrific, and again, he took out the bad parts and made it leaner and works, and just a terrific artist.
Our guest is Ace Atkins. He has got about 18 books out at once, and we're going to get to them all at the same time. The new Spencer book is called Slow Burn. Last Fair Deal Gone Down is the new graphic novel. And then we come back to home, to this area, to Mississippi and into Memphis, and the new book about Quinn Coulson, which has become a real favorite around here. The new one's called The Innocents. Not till July, right?
It's not until July, but
So I need
I
to
brought
put
you a
this
couple
down
early. I just got those. Those are those early editions, what we call them the business galleys, and just hit.
So did you have to sit back here and get your really badass toot on for this photograph?
I did. Either that, or I was like really pissed off, or I don't know what it is.
Take the gosh damn
Yeah,
picture.
that was
and
it.
hurry
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
But this isn't out for a while, so I've got to put this down.
But this series I'm very proud of because
this
it is
is
very
great.
local, and
it gets better every time. It
Yeah.
seems like.
Well, I would agree.
It gets better all the time.
This is a fun one. This is a good. This is
Well,
number.
the last one was pretty darn fun too.
Yeah,
And
they're
that
funny
was-
books, and I don't want people to get the idea when I talk about crime novels that they're heavy-handed and they're going to sit and make you want to go cry in the bathroom when you read them. I mean, it's kind of really what I do is when you guys talk about the dumbasses of the day and the crazy criminals and what they end up getting involved in and whatever. Those are my people. There is great comedy, as you know, made a career out of it in real life, and people screwing up. And as
the man that you sent us, Charlie Spillers, who was here last month.
Oh,
and,
jeez.
talk about a trip. And
Charlie has a million stories, and I
He's
just sit back
unbelievable.
and I hear.
And And you meet him, and he's so not intimidating, which is why he was a great undercover agent.
Yeah.
And his story about the safecrackers made it into the last Quinn book. And I'm sure he could tell you these things till you turn blue in the face.
And he has a million stories. I went to a book signing with a former colleague of his, a guy named John Howman, who also writes these wonderful, true books about his career as a federal prosecutor. His book's called Midnight to Guntown. It just has all this kind of crazy stuff in it. And one of the guys who showed up was a former Dixie Mafia guy. Showed up to his book signing.
Mm-hmm.
We were down in Calhoun County, and he pulled out a wad of cash. He was a fence, and he brought out a wad of cash, probably like $1,000 out of his pocket, and he had gold rings on every finger. And he just said, John, he said, how much are those books? And they were pretty expensive. They're like $35, $40. And he said, oh, they're like $40. The guy said, okay, I'll just take 4 of them. Paid out John in cash. And he said, let me tell you, he said, you nailed me several times, but he said, you always did it honest.
Wow, that is wonderful.
But the real guys, the real criminals, and the Southern and the politicians and the corrupt, they're just the naked corruption of Southern politicians and politics and whatever. I mean, honestly, the criminals are sometimes the most honest people.
It's just not a shock anymore to anybody, and that's a link that is in your inbox about this book about politicians and what really goes on. I can't wait to read this.
Yeah,
and this
and I don't think it'll shock any of us.
I don't think so. And that's part of the point.
We've reached a true golden age of corruption
surprised.
and insanity, and I mean, somebody's asked me the other day. We're talking about how we got a reality TV star who is the the GOP nominee. How crazy! What if anyone thought of that 3 years ago? And I said, look, we're living in the same world right now where people are getting religious advice from the old guy in Duck Dynasty. I mean, what kind of world are we living in? I mean,
it's a very confusing one.
It is.
Yes, and that piece that goes back to Plato and his predictions about civilizations and a democracy and where they were all going. Well, they were all going into the dumper.
Yeah.
And tyranny is next.
Yeah.
I can't wait.
Well, yes, because we'll all go. If we keep on writing and talking about this stuff, we'll be the first in prison. So.
And that would be fine too. Well, thank you. We could talk about this forever. It's a joy to see you as always, and you're doing great work as always. What are you going to do now? Go back on the road again and shake some more hands and kiss babies and get confetti?
I'm going to take a vacation. I'm taking a vacation next week. I'm going to take some time off, and then when I come back, I'm working on the new Spencer novel. Quinn is out second week in July, and then I'm working on a script. So I'm working on a script for a Quinn movie. So keep your fingers crossed.
So somebody has purchased the rights?
They have purchased the rights, and a buddy of mine, a fellow writer down in Oxford, Mississippi, named Jack Pendarvis, and I are working on the script right now. And
you really don't ever take any kind of a break much between these things.
I don't. I'm glad to have the work. That's the thing about it as a writer. And I enjoy it. I would be doing this anyway.
So Spencer will carry on until the publisher or you say enough already?
I tell you, until the fans say they don't want any more Spencer, and the fans have been fantastic, and they still continue to come out. And like I said, I've gone for 2 weeks on this tour. They just love this character, and it's again what a tribute to Robert Parker, one of my personal heroes. That he still wanted, his character still wanted.
And our friend Reed Coleman is writing Jesse Stone books, and he is a fine writer and a good man. Robert Knotts keeps up the Everett and the Virgil books, which are still good.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I miss Bob's touch.
Yeah.
On some of these things, but they still stay alive.
And that's
all that matters.
Yeah, and these guys are good buddies of mine. They're a lot of fun. Reed Coleman is one of them. You'll have to get him in here. He's
been here several times.
You'll have to
and on the phone twice.
Okay. Well, this is why I'm so loyal to Reed. I was in Brooklyn about 3 weeks ago, and he and my wife on a Brooklyn pizza tour. And so he grew up in that neighborhood. He grew up around like Coney Island. He took me around to 3 or 4 different pizza places. And so my loyalty to Reed is huge. And he's one of the funniest. He's a terrific writer.
He's a great writer. And he's funny as heck, too.
And if you haven't read the books that, for his own world.
I've read the Mo Prager's.
Well, read the book Where It Hurts.
I did. Yes.
Fantastic.
He was on for that.
Yeah, fantastic.
We have him on just to hear him talk. It's the accent.
He thinks that we sound funny.
Yeah, I know. No. But he's the one that sounds funny. But Ace, thank you. It's great to see you.
Always good seeing you guys.
These books are out. AceAtkins.com, I presume, is the website.
That's it.
And there are books galore, and you should buy them all. And if you see him, throw confetti
Yes.
But don't touch him. Just
Yeah,
throw
yeah.
confetti at him and or give money. Ace Atkins, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We'll be back in just a moment.